roll call. So I will say your name and just say if you're here. And I apologize when I mispronounce your name. Alexander McFall, Dana Cordano, present. Keith Chelino.
Present.
All right, excellent. Peter Blondo, Suzanne Reed.
Present.
Tiffany Solorio. Present. David Julian, alternate member. All right. So we have a quorum, so we will continue. Let's all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, we will go with the general administration function, part 1. Presentations by the public on matters not on the agenda within the jurisdiction of the commission. Do we have any presentations?
We don't have any at this time.
All right, thank you. Our next item will just be the regular agenda item. And it's item number 2, study session on the draft climate action plan.
I don't think your mic is.
You might have to speak into it a little bit more.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Is it working? There we go. All right, my name is Seamus Laffey. I'm a senior planner in the city's planning division, managing the climate action plan. I'm excited to be here before you tonight. The climate action plan is finally released for public review. It's been quite some time now under development, so happy to get public comment and get your input on it. So I'll start off with a overview of tonight. I'm going to give an overview of what the climate action plan is, our greenhouse gas inventory, what kind of community outreach we have done. We'll go into our climate action plan goals and actions, and then how we're going to implement this. So to start off, the climate action plan is our roadmap to reduce greenhouse gas emissions within the city and increase resiliency in the city in an equitable manner. It is also going to be helping future projects for streamlining for CEQA. It is a climate action plan is going to help all future projects meet greenhouse gas reduction goals. So our baseline inventory for our city's emissions were done in 2018, and this was prepared by AECOM, the city's consultant. They looked at all sources for greenhouse gas emissions, and that is in the appendix. But you'll see here that almost 60% of the city's emissions come from on-road transportation, and then follow that with building emissions. So, gas, and then how we get our electric source for that electric. Here is the emissions forecast projected into the future if we don't do any reductions to our emissions. You can see by 2030, there's a 6% increase in emissions, and then by 2045, there's a 20% increase. So our goal with the climate action plan is to get to carbon neutral, consistent with state targets by 2045, and then as an interim target by 2030, get to a 25% reduction from the 2018 baseline inventory year. A more ambitious target would be to get to 43% below those 2018 numbers. So what does carbon neutrality mean? It means we have a state of net zero emissions. It's reducing emissions as much as possible and removing any remaining emissions through other processes, such as sequestration, industrial carbon capture, or offsets. This is in line with the state. You can see here, state has quite a lot of ambitious climate goals related to energy. The first one, they've set a standard for 100% carbon-free electricity by 2045, and it's 90% by, I believe, 2035. That's coming up quickly. For transportation, there's the Advanced Clean Truck Program. Then below that, the all new cars and passenger trucks need to be zero emission by 2035. So a lot of vehicles going forward will be EVs, and that's our main push in our climate action plan, is to really increase electric vehicles, make it easier for people to charge here in the city, and incentivize their use option. And then other state actions for waste, which Ryan can touch on, reducing organic waste. So for our outreach, we did quite a lot of outreach back in about 3 years ago. We actually came before the Environment and Utilities Commission to get input on the draft actions. We had 2 workshops at Sal's Tacos in the Washington district on those draft actions. Attended multiple Earth Day events. We had an online questionnaire, a webinar during COVID. That informed the actions that are before you tonight. So there are 7 actions. I'll go through each of them. But as you go through the climate action plan, slide, you'll see that each action has a title and description, an estimated reduction in the greenhouse gas emissions. There's an indicator for co-benefits. There's a section for each of them on what you can do as a citizen or a business owner or somebody in the community. Each action has equity issues that have been identified and solutions to assist people who may not be able to afford what is needed to be more resilient. And then there's a description for each action, implementation tactics and metrics as well. So the first action, or first goal, excuse me, for the climate action plan is related to transportation. It is to promote cleaner vehicles and equipment in our community. There are 5 actions. The first one is expanding the electric vehicle charging network through zoning code requirements and installations of public charging infrastructure. And I want to note here, a lot of the things that we're going to go into tonight, the city is already doing. The city has done quite a lot already related to climate. So this is not starting from zero. For example, our zoning code right now requires 20% of all, you have a new development and you have a requirement for, say, 100 parking spaces, 20% of those need to have electric vehicle chargers. So next action, action 2, partnering with warehouse and distribution centers to facilitate zero emission vehicle transition. Action 3 is related to on or off-road vehicles and equipment, especially in city contracts like leaf blowers, all types of off-road equipment, transitioning those to be all electric. Action 4, establishing an electric vehicle car share program with free or subsidized rates for our lower income residents. And then action 5 is establishing zero emission vehicle targets for the city's fleet. The city has, I believe, a little over 400 vehicles, so really transitioning those to electric is going to be a priority. Keep going here with the transportation. Action 6 is providing for more telecommuting city staff. Action 7 is prioritizing transit-oriented development along our major corridors in areas where we have lots of growth. And again, this is something the city is doing already and has been doing for quite some time, going back to deindustrializing the waterfront back in the early 1990s. We have quite a lot of areas in the city that are zoned for mixed use and really incentivizing people to live in a more walkable urban community, which is shown to have lower emissions because you don't need to use your car. Action 8 is funding and expanding active transportation, so scooters or taking the Via van. Action 9, extending regional transit service into West Sacramento. So there was the streetcar, now it's light rail, so getting light rail across Tower Bridge and into Bridge District, actually further down into Southport. And then the last action there, reducing the impact of the freight rail system. This one's a little challenging because the freight rail is, it's a national, but how do we reduce the impacts of that? For example, when you have the freight crossing a road like Jefferson, that backs up traffic, it makes it harder for people to walk. How do we reduce those impacts? Actually, I just saw an article today that locally Sierra Northern Pacific has a hydrogen engine that they're deploying here in West Sacramento. So the next goal is designing a future with zero carbon power sources. So really, this is relying on our utility provider, PG&E. Action 11, enhancing utility coordination and advocating for the city's utility provider to provide access to carbon-free electricity and additional incentives for building energy efficiency retrofits and rebates. And then Action 12 is incentivizing local solar and enhanced energy storage and promote participation in community solar programs. This goal planned for all electric buildings citywide. This touches on the second largest emission source in the city, which is the energy used for our buildings, for heating, cooling, the lights. Where does that energy come from? A lot of it is natural gas right now. So how do we eliminate natural gas in buildings? And then also, where does that electricity come from? Does it come from clean sources? So these actions are related to that. Action 13, develop and adopt a building electrification program and incentives for existing buildings. Action 14 is establish energy performance standards and GHG emission limits for existing commercial buildings. And then 15 is mandating all electric for new construction. And this would be in a phased approach, first applying to the newer areas that are just fully, greenfield development, recognizing that infill development has other pros. So maybe you don't want to fully burden infill development with the extra cost if it's not cost neutral quite yet. And then Action 16 is create a home energy audit program and minimum efficiency thresholds. The next goal is create a waste-free city. So Action 7 is expand commercial and multifamily organic waste programs, which we're doing right now. Action 18, expand the food recovery network to collect edible food from businesses. And Action 19 is reduce unnecessary material consumption. And another goal is build carbon negative and livable communities. Developing and implementing urban forest management plan. That's really important. Get more shade. All the benefits of trees. So getting more of those. Then Action 21, evaluate carbon removal opportunities from industrial processes and direct air capture. It's kind of a catch-all. We can't quite get carbon neutral by 2025. So this was our last goal here on adaptation and resiliency. It's create a resilient community and protect our most vulnerable residents from climate hazards, recognizing that those who are in the lower income, they have a much harder time adjusting to climate, for climate change. For example, when we have these big heat events or lots of wildfire smoke, they can't maybe afford the extra air filters or turn the air conditioning down. So Action 22, integrating our climate adaptation actions across city operations, processes, and policies. This is a catch-all action that we really, as a whole city government, need to get, do more on climate adaptation. Action 23 is adopt a comprehensive approach to reduce the effects of extreme heat. I'm sure we're all aware of our extreme heat days are getting longer. We have more larger waves of extreme heat, and they're more intense. Then on the flip side, with climate whiplash, we're getting more events with higher precipitation and increased risk of extreme flood events. So that's Action 24, is how do we reduce our vulnerability to flooding. And then Action 25 is increasing our water resilience and prepare for extended drought. And lastly, Action 26 is protecting residents from wildfire smoke and poor air quality. So a lot of actions. Each of those actions are a lot more detailed in the climate action plan. Get into those tonight. And then regarding implementation, thankfully now we have Ryan. He's our sustainability manager, and he's going to be taking on the climate action plan and implementing it. So I'll pass it over to Ryan.
Okay, thanks, Seamus. Hi, everybody. So I'm just going to cover the next couple of slides. So as Seamus was talking before, covering those previous slides, we have a lot of actions that we want to take. So once it is adopted, which is going to happen this year, it's going to move from the planning division to my division. So we then have to decide, well, what do we focus on? Because we're a small city, but we also have these ambitious goals. So we have two phases. There's phase 1 and phase 2. Phase 1 is years 1 and 2. Phase 2 is years 1 through 5. So currently the recommendations from our consultants is to focus on expanding the electric charging network, increasing municipal fleet ZEV. So we actually currently have a voucher in place from the Department of Energy for swapping out fuel-based vehicles with electric vehicles. We're hoping that voucher stays. So we're getting us started on that process. We also have a priority of creating a waste-free city. So as sustainability manager, I oversee the waste management contract, and I've been very much involved in the Smart Truck program rollout, which has been very successful so far. When we started Smart Truck back in September, October, we had 300 to 400 instances of contamination per week, and the latest numbers show that some weeks were as low as 50. So the biggest thing about that is it's a plastic bag. So as we all are not surprised to know, 90% of the contaminations that we get is just plastic. So as Seamus mentioned, we're not starting from zero. This is just kind of a formalization of our goals, and it's a way that we as citywide can now have a shared document that can guide us. Phase 2 is more long-term planning related activities, working with PG&E, also doing research into community choice aggregate for power energy options within the city. That is something we're looking at now, as well as planning for all electric buildings citywide for existing and new buildings. So, on the screen, we have a very optimistic list of grants that we can get each of these CAP goals. As you are all probably very familiar, the new administration has a different position about the priority of these kinds of things. So, there's no need to be coy about it. We're probably not going to get as much funding as we might have gotten under a different administration. So that's going to require us to be more creative. And that we do have a 2-year budget coming up, and based on the new realities, I may be requesting more money from the city itself than I would have otherwise if the federal administration was of different nature in relation to providing environmental. So I just want you guys to know I've been following this stuff for my job and for the cap, and I am trying to adapt to the new situation, and I am maybe over ambitious with the amount of money I request, but try to be right on target with what we think makes sense for a city our size to actually, I think everybody in this room is very committed to this document not being an empty document. We want it to be a real document. We want this to really change the culture of this city. That's my hope and desire. So getting the cap adopted is a very big step in that direction. So
I got
you got me? Okay, so next step. So after our meeting tonight, we are going to be going to the Planning Commission. It's either going to be in 2 steps or 1, but we're definitely going to the Planning Commission for council to receive their feedback like we're receiving your feedback tonight. And then we will be going to council, hopefully spring, maybe summer, to present this to our elected. And upon adoption, like I said, we're going to have a little celebration. I'm going to come over to my shop. I'll pull out some of my hair and then I'll get to work. Public comment, Q&A.
Do we have any questions or comments from the commissioners?
And colleagues have them too, so you can take them in any order. And you want me to start?
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, as you said, it's been a long time coming, but it was well worth the wait. I was very pleased with everything I saw in the document. I think you guys did a good job, and our consultants have been excellent. The presentation, the format, the organization of the document is great. I think it's readable, and the graphic display is easy to understand and comprehend. I was really happy to see that, and plus the attention to equity and all of the goals. I think it's important for us to keep that at the top of our list as we move in this future political and economic environment. So I really like the things you can do piece, because as you note in the document, you're going to be relying on a lot of voluntary compliance at the get-go, and giving people something that they moderately undertake as opposed to large expenditures is, I think, really helpful. And acknowledging those organizations and businesses in our community that are models, basically, of getting out there in climate action. And I think that's inspiring for others to follow. I do have a few recommendations, as I always do. In the executive summary, which was everything's been very well written. Congratulations on that. I just didn't think that it conveyed the level of urgency that is upon us. And I know you were precise in terms of the use of data, and a lot of it, however, is a little bit older, and some from, say, 2018, 2020, and things have really gotten worse since then. So, by the way, I have this all written up, so you can take detailed notes. So I'm going to just breeze right through it. So certain things like James Hansen has a new paper out citing that global warming has accelerated since 2010 by more than 50% over the prior half century. 2024 was the hottest year, exceeding the heat increase from 2023. We've already exceeded the 1.5 degree Paris target. And also, we know from having lived through it that Sacramento experienced more than 45 days of 100 degree Fahrenheit and over in 2024. So I think in the introduction, in the either in a preface or augmenting the executive summary to create a little bit more urgency about why this is important and why people need to step up and participate is gonna, would help. And I also, with respect to limited resources or limitations on resources that we might have otherwise wanted, and just the need for resources altogether, I think it would be really important to acknowledge, which you have in the text of the report, but not so much in the executive summary, is to actually name out the co-collaborators so that we don't know, it's not on us just alone. There is a lot happening, and we need to really push the regional cooperation and collaboration in order to utilize what resources we have more efficiently and effectively. So I think naming them out and, reference to the new regional collaborative and might really help in letting people know that we want to collaborate, for one thing, and number two, that this is going to have to be a region to really make things happen. Specifically, I liked the Appendix C on adaptation a lot, and I actually think it's very well done. And my recommendation would be that it be elevated as to be a chapter in the climate action plan and not just an appendix, because I think it has a lot of relevance. We're not going to get our emissions reductions down as quickly as we would like to stop the impact of climate change, and therefore adaptation becomes equally important in the shorter term. So I think it's well done. I think we need to relabel the heading and put it in as a chapter and call this climate action and adaptation plan. And then two last points. You talked about the voluntary actions, education, outreach, and incentives, but I wasn't fully clear about what specifically you had in mind with respect to that, and so maybe you could amplify that. That's a question a little bit more, Ryan. And before you do, I just wanted to say something about electrification. Yes, transportation is our biggest sector, and electrification of our transportation system is important, as are electrification of our residential and commercial buildings and other processes. However, our grid is not substantial enough to support the kind of electrification that everybody's talking about. It's also a goal in the climate action plan. So I think that's where first of all, the regional coordination collaboration is going to become even more important. But also, I applaud the direction of having people sign up for Valley Clean Energy and relying on our sources of alternative energy. But I also would like to see a little bit more focus and contemplation about the possibilities of community energy. And that would be generating our own, either in a localized situation, say around a concentration of commercial or warehouse development, or at the port, to become essentially independent and off the grid with our own internal microgrid technology. So that's something I think it's worthy of exploration, along with your effort to coordinate utility and energy sources. I have to make this because I've just got my third notice that we're going to have a blackout day for an upgrade of our system, and it's getting to be a little bit annoying as you plan to spend the day without electricity and then are notified in the morning that just kidding. So, and I think it's probably even more difficult for our commercial establishments that are planning not to have electricity for a whole day, and then all of a sudden find out, voila, here it is. So it's an issue, communications issue, so that's something that we need to understand what's happening. But also it's a testament to the inadequacy of our grid system to really tolerate a lot of manipulation. So I'd really like to see us become a little bit, more independent about our reliance. And that's it. Good job. I look forward to working with you on it.
Well, thank you for all the specific comments and praise. That's like, I'm kind of fourth quarter guy. He's been doing everything else so far. That goes towards Seamus and his team.
You're the wide receiver.
Yeah,
Got it.
just waiting for the ball. Yeah, towards the voluntary compliance, and towards the rebates and, what we do on the, ground floor, that is something I'm starting to process. That is something I invite you guys to reach out to me about if you have specific things in mind. One of the things I was tooling around was something coming up with like a West Sac Climate Champ outreach program, where if you showcase, it'll be based on educating you about the cap, but then it could be, hey, these are things I've already done, or these are things that I'm going to do, and then you would get like a West Sac Climate Champ sticker that you can put on your EV or on your car or on kid, and then also maybe incentivizing that with Ace ticket, or, as you mentioned, Suzanne, we are going to be pretty reliant upon voluntary action. But voluntary action can make a significant difference. Plastic bags going into the trash, putting organic materials into the organics cart, eating less meat. There are a lot of things that people can do voluntarily, and if we can try to get that energy going, I'm hopeful that will then create a positive relationship with some of this stuff, because it can feel very doom and gloom and very defeatist. So I am working towards some kind of outreach piece that would go along with the adoption of the cap, so that people can have something very simple to say, okay, there's 10 things I could do as a resident. I'm gonna pick 2, and if I do, then I can be entered into a raffle prize. I'm thinking of lawn tool rebates and other kinds of rebates at a smaller scale to get people moving in that direction. And then, depending on the kind of funding we receive, both from the city as well as possibly from the state, then more ambitious. So
One of the things I was curious about is some of the implementation takes some technical support in terms of how do you do things. I know you're looking at an audit program for the residences, and we also have an audit program at the county level that we're rolling out, that's got people that are actually able to help people execute. Because I've tried winterizing myself, and I can't find the right stuff to put around the door, the sliding door, and that kind of thing. There's nobody at Home Depot that can answer the question, or tell you which thing to buy, and that kind of technical support, and also for our businesses in terms of greening opportunities. So is there any thought being given to a place that people can go to look up, rather than having to do the YouTube search and all this kind of thing, like consolidated channels where they can find the information that they need to support them in executing some of the measures, and whether they're a business or an individual?
yeah, that's a great recommendation. Well, so I think the last time we met, I was discussing that I was hiring another staff member, and she's right over there, Teresa. So she is going to be my co-conspirator in making these things happen. And she actually has a previous professional experience with doing audits and doing, light bulb picture, smaller scale stuff, but educational stuff, going to someone's home, helping people get over that little hurdle. And even her program was related to disadvantaged communities and helping people from that community get training on that work, so that it could work into kind of job. So that's definitely something we're going to be talking about when it comes to that action of doing the audits, not simply doing an audit and giving them a piece of paper at the end, but potentially getting some funding so that we can actually have action take place when we go there. The commercial section, I hadn't considered that, but something like a dedicated green page where we can, like you said, not just YouTube, something a bit more polished. That's worth.
Or just links to where they can get technical information about doing this.
Sure.
And we do have Green Business Network, and there's, there are sources for that. In terms of engaging our business, one of the recommendations that I hope doing at the county level as well is trying to involve like Lowe's, Aces, Home Depot in, they have gardening workshops. Why can't they have a, home weatherization workshop? I mean, it's a marketing ploy for them as well, because they've got all that stuff there. It's very well organized, but that kind of engagement in the maybe help. But congratulations, welcome aboard, Rita, and it sounds like you're off on the right track. So thank you.
Yeah, I'd like to echo Suzanne's sentiment that I was really pleased with the state of the document and the amount of thought and consideration that went into all of the individual actions and the roadmap forward. Like Suzanne, I had some specific comments. I also agree that Appendix C should be elevated and maybe incorporated into Goal 7. That adaptation and resiliency is going to be one of the chief I would say safety nets for our municipality going forward, because it's very likely that we're not going to achieve any 1.5 or even 2 degrees Celsius temperature rise targets. So we should be preparing for climate change to come in more intense and more unpredictable ways, as was mentioned, climate whiplash. So even if we were to reach a state of not so bad climate impact, I do think it's worthwhile for us to pursue energy resiliency, water resiliency, and general equity of access and management as kind of that forward-thinking mindset as we go forward. I also had the same note about our grid not being capable of sustaining 100% electrification right now. So I'm wondering if there is a plan in place or anything that could be solicited from planning committee or from the public for how to achieve that for the city. I also was wondering if there was any idea of a transportation emission split between light and heavy duty vehicles. We do have a lot of heavy trucking, distribution centers, warehousing. So I'm wondering what share of total emissions are a result of heavy duty on road versus light duty on road. That would be an interesting thing to explore to show where we could have the fastest gains. And then I had some specific comments on individual actions. So for Action 7, on moving people through corridors and efficient access in the city, the main transit issue that I feel like should be addressed in that is the bifurcation of the city by the freeway. We have that kind of Southport and then Washington, Bright, Broderick split. Particularly with the master plan idea for building out in Southport and having even more residents down there, we need to have a better way of getting them access to all parts of the city, town, freeway access, and further west. So I'd like to see something a little bit more concrete addressed in that. Something like the development on 5th Street and Delta Lane is giving us a little bit better access between, for example, Southport and the northern area by the ballpark. But I'd like to see a little bit more done in that area. Action 9, I'm very supportive of it, and I'm wondering if there is a current or draft form available of the bike, pedestrian, and trails master plan that we provided. I just need a link to find it somewhere. That would be very useful. And then lastly, Action 20 for urban greening. That's definitely something that I think is an easy first focus because of its synergistic benefits for reduced cooling requirements for buildings. So that could tie in very well with Action 23. And I think there should be a little bit of focus on determining where there are areas with a high degree of blacktop cover or sprawl. So it may be worthwhile to study the distribution of existing trees as that relates to the socioeconomic status of the area, and just see if there is a roadmap there for first plantings and landscape alterations to give an added benefit to more disadvantaged communities first, where that impact may be more felt, and then broadly attack the city. Yeah, I'll just close with, again, great job on this and really excited to work with you on it. And I have these notes available also if you.
Yeah, actually, this is a great point I want to make, because we're in the public comment period right now, so you can provide those comments to me via email. We have a 60-day public comment period, so anybody that's watching online or anybody in the public, they can submit their comments in. We'll try and get them incorporated. I also want to mention that this is kind of the overall policy document. Each of these actions will require follow-on ordinances with city council approval and a lot more in-depth research and public outreach. So a lot of good questions have been raised tonight. I don't have all the answers, but when we go to implement each action, we're really going to dive deep into each one, and that's really I'm glad we have Ryan on board. This is really a full-time job to have somebody managing the climate action plan, doing implementation. We'll have every 5 years or even less than that do an update of our inventory, track where we are, how are we progressing. So it's really a full-time job to manage the climate action plan. For your comment on the bike ped trails master plan, we do have that. Our transportation division has it on their page of the city website. It was recently updated. And heard multiple comments now about our electric grid or the PG&E infrastructure able to handle full electric, and that is definitely a common concern and question we get, and that is something that we'll need to work with PG&E on. I will say that it is kind of an interesting the grid is set up, the electric grid is set up, power grid is set up for peak demand in summer when everybody's running their air conditioning. So if you transition buildings that are using their natural gas for heating in the winter, that is, nobody's running their air conditioner. So if you transition your heater to be electric, you're not, it's a different time of the year. And same thing for EV charging. You're typically charging late at night, early in the morning. So the peak demand of when you're using that electricity is a different time of day or a different time of the year. So hopefully it's not going to be as challenging for PG&E to upgrade their infrastructure to accommodate that increased demand. But again, we're relying on PG&E.
I would be hesitant to do that.
Understood.
I agree with you that some sort of a microgrid development for storage capacity, even just as a backup or a supplementary supply, I think is the right.
And we do have battery backup in here. I believe we have microgrid in here, but I can't search, the paper copy here. But thank you for your comment.
I kind of want to follow up on PG&E because I've been on this commission since they started talking about it and having the initial work groups and stuff. There was talk back then that we might do a shift from PG&E to another local electric supplier like SMUD. And so I don't know if because it sounded like from initial discussions, PG&E wasn't on board for meeting our climate action goals. And I am hesitant to think that they really are saying that they're going to do it now after them being so adamant against it before. So I was just wondering if there were plans for that switch or potential discussions. So that was.
Not sure when it's up, but my understanding is that when SMUD looked at PG&E's infrastructure, West Sac, it was not, it required way too much maintenance for them to take it on for it to be,
Right.
yeah. In terms of the other, address that.
Yeah, so I've recently been tasked by the community development director to start doing some research into community choice aggregate as an
Okay.
option. And so I've started doing some background research, meeting with a few within the city to get some of that history, then start, as we've said already a few times, there's kind of a staggering of effort, and we want to kind of be ready for the cap to get adopted, have some of this stuff queued up. So I am starting to now. I've met with Kristen Wraithwall and with Yolo County, and we've already discussed Valley Energy and learned a little bit about so that, and that's also within the cap, community choice agriculture.
Right.
What is
Great.
a couple other points that were mentioned by Alexander. So when it comes to resiliency, that is within the document, and we do have a good partnership with a nonprofit called Mercy Coalition, which I'm not sure if you're aware of, but it's an amazing organization. It's currently housed within a church that's behind Chevron on Jefferson. And it's just it's led by a very passionate man. And it's anybody who's experiencing any kind of trauma, come to the Mercy Cafe, get a bite. It doesn't have to be homelessness, mental trauma, health trauma. And they are actually planning on expanding that ground to be something of kind of resiliency hub. So places that, people in the homeless community can go to when we have ash days, when we have heat days. He works very closely with Mercy Housing. You guys may or may not be aware, but the city is purchasing hotels and motels on West Capitol, converting those to transitional housing for homeless. So we do have options. We do have a homeless outreach team. And so once this gets adopted, or as this gets adopted, I hope create more and more partnerships, even within this. Like my goal is to kind of be the middle of the wheel and to connect all these dots so that, I can just flip a switch and say, hey, we're going to have a smoke day. We can perform all the outreach. And then as far as water resiliency goes, this is where Race is going to come in as well. She's going to be taking over the water conservation part. And, I've been doing that for years, so it'll be a very strong partnership. We did our water budget back in December, and we are currently under budget by quite a bit. So that doesn't mean we can't get better. And the state is going to be tightening it up over the years, so closer to being over budget, but currently we're under budget by quite a bit. So I think continuing to do outreach to high water users, increasing our communications and partnership commercial properties is going to further that.
I just want to echo the other comments and thank you and congratulations on getting it to this point. I remember the presentation from a few years ago, and one of the things that I remember really striking me during that presentation was how much our individual trips around town need to shift to other zero emission methods of getting around town. And I'm not perfect in that respect, but there's a lot of work to do over the next few years as this is implemented. I think the ambitious target is the one that we should head towards. That's probably obvious, but I know that there is a cost to focusing on the ambitious target as opposed to the moderate one. But if you look at the charts in the CAP of getting to the end goal, I think if we don't pursue the ambitious target, we will fall very short of the end goal by 2045. And so I think really trying to focus on that and prioritizing actions as this is implemented is going to be really important. A few comments about particular action items. For number 15, the all-electric new construction phase-in, I think that this question of cost and whether it's more expensive to go all electric, I think the data is even better now than it was when maybe this was originally contemplated. And this discussion has come up in the context of the rebuild in LA after the fires. And it's pretty close. And so I think it makes sense maybe for new construction, just make it all electric. And maybe the urban infill could be phased in, but even that, I think the phase-in isn't necessary at this point, and technology will continue to be more competitive at the electric scale. For Action 20, the Urban Forest Master Plan, I agree. I think the co-benefits of urban tree canopy, particularly in our disadvantaged communities here in West Sac, it's really beneficial. And so I think that focusing on that and really working to increase tree canopy in those neighborhoods is going to be really important for the goal. So just applaud that is kind of one of the top items, I think, that came up in the survey of folks and which action items they really cared about. So I just want to echo that. And then for extreme heat, action 23, the idea of community resilience centers is really important. And I think there are opportunities to partner with other ongoing projects in the community. So the reconstruction of Bright Park, finding a way to have a community resilience center there. The Washington Unified Joint School District, the school district here is reconstructing many of their campuses over the next few years. And I think making sure that we're engaged in that process because the school in my neighborhood is actually losing space during the reconstruction that I think would have served as a great community resilience center. But unfortunately, they're eliminating that space in the reconstruction. So that's a missed opportunity already. But there'll be other campuses that will be starting their planning and construction in the next few years. And then funding. I know that the next 2 to 4 years are going to be really difficult for funding at the federal level, particularly for these types of actions. And the voters just passed Proposition 4 in November, and I think that's going to be a great bridge to funding these types of projects around California. But I think West Sacramento is well suited to compete for those dollars. And I can't guarantee anything, but I'm happy to be a resource as you start to think about applying for grants and what might become available, both through that and then other state budget actions. And then I don't know how you pull down dollars, but IKEA has a foundation, and one of their focus areas is climate. I have no idea how you get their attention, but maybe by putting it out in the world here, they'll hear us. And I'm sure someone from their foundation is watching, and maybe they could contribute to the local community that supports their store. So again, thank you for this, and appreciate the opportunity to offer some comments.
Go ahead.
So, thank you. On to and
Is your mic on? Is it on green?
can I hit the button?
There you go.
No, I had to hit the button. All right. So just in general on the plan itself and the language, a couple of things. I would be more aggressive. There are some instances where you say, we're going to plan, we're going to develop plans. Plans are great. You need to put some implementation in there. So if you read through, there's some soft languages in there that says, okay, we need to do this. Not, we'll plan to do this. So if you hear that when you're reading it, that's one thing. I think it's with the urgency that other people mentioned. My concern is definitely you have goals, and I don't think reading this you would achieve it or maybe even come close. So in the areas, I do appreciate the areas where you say, here's what you can do in the individual. There's a lot of advocacy in there, especially for people who are renting. Now you say in the wording, as a property owner, you should do the following, or I would call out the renters. They have an obligation here. And we don't call them out and said, hey, you need to do this. And I'll try to just be human here in this. If I'm renting, if I go to a renter and say, hey, I need you to do this, they're going to turn around and say, sure, we're going to raise your rent to pay for it. They're going to do it anyway, maybe, I don't know. But that's the concern for the equity part. It's like, well, you're going to do it, but then we're going to raise the rent. But if I'm a renter, I could see the dilemma or the issue, which is I'm not incentive to do solar on the property because I'm not paying for it. And for the renter, they don't have any incentive to put solar or give money to solar because they could be out next month and not be there. So that thing needs to be addressed somehow in the document that says, here, if you're a renter, whether you rent buildings, several buildings, or just a house, here's what you need to think about in terms of, because you belong in this community as well as a property owner. Sorry, landlords, yes. The renting people. So yes, so the landlords need to do something, because you're asking the renters to advocate. I think you need to be stronger in the language. And I would look at everything where it says advocate, or is sort of like, okay, I'm going to advocate, but it's sort of wishful thinking. It's like something more in addition to that. And something in general on the metrics that I notice is that in some areas where you have the metrics, it's very clear. Number of bike paths, bike miles, and some other metrics, you're a little softer. We're using this tool, we're going to do this and this and this. You may want to take a look at that and be consistent on the metrics. It'd be, if I'm looking at this downstream, let's say it's 2035, did you achieve those targets? Did you get those? I'm not going to ask for how, I just like, do you have those numbers? So a little clarity on that, because if you're going to grade yourself there, you know, how are we going to look at this plan if adopted, that it's on target, or you're behind schedule, or where are you? And as you mentioned earlier, I put in, I think, page 25, a note that says you have additional risks. So political, I put political and social. Frankly, I think some people still are not convinced there's a climate issue. So that's part of the marketing and communication that you have to do to convince people, especially if you're asking them to voluntarily do things and change behavior in those subjects. And it's, you know, for one of the things that I see here that was very obvious, you're recommending, for example, be prepared for electrification, be prepared for this. You don't say in the document at all, buy an electric car, buy a ZEV or whatever. I didn't see that. You recommend buying equipment, off-road equipment, that's ZEV, but I did not see, hey, go, the next time you are considering buying a vehicle, buy this, even ahead of any California rules. So just as I read through this, like, something in terms of you need to be more, I guess, for me, I don't need to be as politically sensitive. So I could just say, yeah, this is what you need, this is the goal. We're asked to do this. We got to make it there. And here's what we need to do. Here's what every citizen needs, every resident here needs to do, and every business owner needs to do as well. So, and then for the rest of it, I will say, I'll leave it for the additional comments. I have scrolled all over this document, so I'll submit it in a different way. Thank you.
I actually would a little bit disagree with that on the language, because when we're thinking about our community, you have to think about the community at large. And West Sacramento has a large population of people who are financially like they're just getting by, right? They're just scraping by. And when you're adding super strong language in these things, it's going to be a deterrent from them wanting to do things. The best way to do it is showing them how they can do this with their limited means. You know, the stressor of coming from a household where you can barely sit there and pay your electricity bill is astronomical. Like, if you've never experienced that, you can't imagine it. It's very stressful. And so by adding additional stressors to these families, that is just going to make them shut down and not want to participate. And what we want to do is we want to provide that outreach to have them participate. And I think better ways is to show them that you don't have to do something huge like buying an EV. That's a lot. Like, I have an EV and I had to pay for the infrastructure in my house. I have to pay for the car, you know, and you have to think about where you're traveling because the infrastructure isn't completely there. So that transition is a lot of mental load for a family who's already just thinking about where my next meal is going to be. So I think the important thing is for us to, you know, make the the document accessible to everyone within the community. I mean, there's those of us out there with the means to be able to do this. And yes, we should be alarmed by, what's happening. I mean, I work in climate change on a daily basis in my work. And so, I have people who tell me, how can you even do that? Because it's so stressful for me when I think about it, and for me, it's just a day to day. But we need to think about that is a stressor for people. And so how are we going to communicate this to these households that maybe just they're so mentally, emotionally, physically, financially strapped that they can't add something more. So what we need to do as a community and as I think a city is provide education, provide little things like maybe incentives on changing all of your, they don't sound like big steps, but changing all your light bulbs, incentives on and education classes at different community centers, like the library, at different schools that can tell them like, hey, when we're talking about sorting our waste, this is what we're talking about. Like the flyers they get, they're really clear and they're really nice, but if you're like just thinking about taking care of your family, you're not gonna probably do that. But read that and not really care. But when you go to something like an education class that's easily accessible at a library or school or here at City Hall, it's free. And at those things you provide, like we're gonna give you, I don't know, some sort of small thing that helps you on your climate journey, your personal climate journey, because since we are going to have to rely so much on people volunteering, we have to think like, how can we help everybody? Because everybody's climate journey is going to be different. And so I like the way that we have it. I think that the wording is accessible, it's inviting, it allows you to think about these things. And I think, as Seamus stated before, we have to remember too that this is just like the skeleton of the plan. This is what we want to do. These are our goals, but everything that we do moving forward once it's adopted are the actions that we're going to be taking to support those goals. And so you want to make sure that that goal document, the document expressing our goals, is going to be something that the community will get behind. And so that's my feeling about it. I mean, I feel like we have, in what has been put together, feels like an accessible document that I think the community can get behind with education. So, yeah.
So I think there's a middle ground to be had between both, because I do agree that the urgency of the situation merits a little bit more strength in the language in some areas. But I'm inclined more to agree with the idea of people's backs are against the wall. They don't need one more thing. You need to make the barrier to entry as low as possible to get engagement. But since we are still in a very early stage of this implementation, I think I would just encourage a general review of for each action and each potential enforcement mechanism, where do you have a carrot? Where do you have a stick? If there is a true opportunity for an easy rebate or something else, that's something that should be noted and explored early on to see how well that can be integrated into the plan. Just like if there is an easy mode of enforcement and a place where language could maybe be strengthened to support that enforcement, that's something that all should be given consideration at this stage, since we are very early in the
What you guys are talking about is a big problem, because there are people who make decisions and this isn't part of their portfolio decision making. And I am hopeful that through the rebates and through the home audit, we can try to make that very low bar to jump over. But the other thing is, the Smart Truck program. I was surprised so far by the adoption. When this was an amendment for our contract with waste management, where I'm not sure if you guys are all familiar, but basically we watch contamination over of parts throughout. And as this was going through City Council for adoption, I was expecting a really huge amount of whiplash. And there were certainly a lot of people who were upset. But if you look at the behavior, it's been significant. So if we can find a way to be respectful with our language, but serious with our actions, we'll get where we want.
Yeah, I think the smart truck is a really good example of that because it was something easy. I do actually put down a comment about the smart truck. One thing we need to consider moving forward, with when we're adopting these technologies, which are wonderful and really helping us advance these climate goals, is that there are flaws. Like we've gotten notices because we put compostable packing material that comes in something into the compost because it can't recognize that that's not really plastic, it's compostable materials. So those are the type of things we have to think of when we're using our stick. Are these people, maybe they had 3 notices because they get something we get it from a butcher box that we get meat from, and so they put the compostable material in there. So but we haven't been putting in the compost because we kept getting notices, so now we're throwing it in the trash, but it really should be in the compost because it's industrial compost waste. And so those are the things we need to just really think about when we're doing our incentives, when we're doing our enforcement, because technology isn't going to keep up with itself, really, is the problem. And so, yeah, but I mean, the smart truck's been great though, I think, because I know some people in my neighborhood who were a little bit mad about it at first, but when you actually sit there and talk to your neighbors and you're like, oh, it's actually not that hard, and you go, and you give them ideas of how they can compost, how they can separate their waste, that's really important. I was at the barn this summer, doing one of the booths for the Rhythm on the River, and the city was out there giving out free recycling bins, just giving out free bins that people could put their recycling in, the little blue bins for an office or a house. And that's a wonderful incentive program, something that small, because now somebody has something, they go, oh, I have a recycle bin, I didn't have to go out and get it. Waste management, you can call them and they'll give you 2 counter compost little bins if you want them. So these are the things I had to seek out these things though, and most people aren't going to do that. So it's how do you get that education across that there are these incentives here too, because a lot of times we push for enforcement without understanding that maybe that carrot wasn't available to everybody because not everybody knew about it. So it's something we have to really keep in mind when actually implementing the plan.
Tiny thing. We are actually working on a outreach and waste sorting document sent to everybody. And to Peter's point, it's going to be going to the property and not the property owner. So that way renters hit it too, because renters are 45% of our city.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I was actually surprised by that number. So we are working toward increasing that education. Now that Race is here, I'm also trying, it's still in the works, but I might be getting a staff member dedicated just to outreach and enforcement, because a lot of it is simply getting out of this building, going to Home Depot, going to Lowe's, going to parks events, being, because people see fire out there, people see police out there. My goal is for our division, to the degree that we can, to also be out there so that people can put a face to us. You can get a recycle bin, you can get a recycle bell, Beanie Baby, you can get light bulbs, I really do want to start fleshing this. So I appreciate all.
And those things are so important to the community because the people who are going to utilize a lot of those events are people who are like, I want to bring my kids to this, it's free, and they can't take their kid to Disney on Ice, and so they're like, great, Rhythm on the River, that will be fun. So those are great, and I really am happy to see the community doing that outreach, and that you've been doing it well before the climate action plan has been adopted. So it's really good because I think we're ahead of our goals at this point because we started implementing them even while developing the plan. So.
Chair, I'd like to make some comments.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. I just wanted to first and foremost thank all of the folks who've participated in putting this together and all of those activities that have led up to formulating this actual written document. Like the chair was saying, that there's been previous activities and previous conversations and efforts, and now it's culminating in an actual plan. So this is fantastic. So thank you to all of the community members who participated and all of the staff, the city's staff and leadership. And I also agree with the comments from the rest of the commission that this document is extremely accessible, as it should be for all of our, citizens in West Sac and beyond. It was very clear and highlighted the right things, in my opinion. I'm really interested in actionable items that this body and those of us community members who may have missed prior opportunities will be able to have going forward. So I love that we're talking about outreach, because I really do think that, the education, the outreach is, it's critical. It's just critical. It's not going to probably be done without it. And so that area will need to be, accelerated and emphasized and really just pumped up. And it sounds like we have the right staff here to do it. So I'll just reiterate that in any way the staff can use this body to help, please make that very explicit to us. Some other comments that I have and questions I will also send in writing to be answered. They don't all need to be answered here. One of my questions was in the introduction about flood risk due to utility company actions. I wasn't sure what that was, and I don't know if it was further explained in the document, but I would be interested to know about that. So you can just point me right back to the document if it's in there. Do you want to jump in, or yeah?
Sure, we can get into that. Was that a specific action that?
No, I don't think that it is. It was just a mention that we want to, mitigate flood risks due to utility company actions, but I wasn't sure what they were. That was in the introduction. So again, it could be answered later.
We'll have to take a look at that.
Yeah, that's fine. So also in Chapter 4, in implementation and monitoring, the city mentioned that they'd added some staff for this effort, which is fantastic to hear. And I'm just curious, is there additional budget to add more, or would we need to wait for the next budget cycle to know that? So again, I'll send these in writing. I was really, my curiosity was piqued again because I remember hearing about the status of, or the edible food recovery program, and I was curious about the status on that, and whether there's a role for volunteers for efforts such as that. That there's city programs, but those don't always lend themselves to citizens coming in and helping with doing the business of the city, but sometimes they do. And I think, to the extent that we can utilize volunteers, it's always good, right? Increases the impact. And then I'm wondering, there was a mention on page 63 about the difference between community solar developed and purchased by residents. So I can expand on that question, but it was just a note that I had that if maybe it's unclear to me, it might be unclear to other readers, and so I'll include that in my questions. Let me see. And then you did touch on it, so thank you. Other commissioners brought it up as another critical part of achieving our goals, and that is community choice aggregate supply. So I'm really glad to hear, Ryan, you say that you've already started researching that, because my question is, if the current one we know currently offers 45% options and 100% renewable power options, what are the obstacles encountered to adopt joining a CCA? If that's there for the having, what are the historical obstacles? So I look forward to maybe you reporting out what you find to this commission on that, Ryan, since you're looking into it. Sounds like there's more work to be done, but it is clearly an option that we should pursue. piggybacking with the fact that this city cannot improve the grid infrastructure. It's not something that we do. It's something that the utilities do, or the owners of the grid, which I don't believe that we are, even within our own city. And so we're going to need other sources. It's going to not be one source. It's going to be multi-source. It's going to be multi-pronged solution. So, whether it's transportation or whether it's waste, efficiency, the power supply will also need to be diverse. And I love the interest and knowing that we really need to look to some microgrids. I would also love to funnel some contacts to the city regarding potential funding opportunities through the Energy Commission. So I know that we are funding microgrid research and demonstrations there, so something to explore. And it's a small note, but OPR was mentioned in the report, and I just wanted to, I guess, let you know that it does have a new name. I don't know if that's been pointed out, and I don't know if you want to update that.
We'll get that updated.
Okay. That concludes my comment.
Any other comments? Yeah.
So one of them, the edible food recovery. So as supervisor of the waste management contract, two of my team members, Susan and Rachel, are stellar at waste reduction. And we actually, there's a piece of legislation called SB 1383, requires the diversion of edible food recovery, the landscape waste away from the landfill, compost. So we actually exceeded our goal last year. So
That's wonderful.
There's a lot of action that's been done. So not only the Smart Truck program, we also have funding through the state for implementation of SB 33. Through that, we've purchased a lot of compost. We launched a new program called Compost for All, where people can just send us a one-page application and get a whole bunch of magic dirt dropped in front of their house. That's been very popular. So for a sense of perspective, starting this year moving forward, the city is required to purchase and distribute 4,000 tons of compost because of its carbon sequestration value, and it's, just like closing the loop. So we have been ambitious with that. We have met that goal. On the edible food side, we have a contract with Yellow County Yellow Food Bank. We have met that requirement. They continue to distribute a great deal of food. So we're actually ahead of the curve, which is not always the case with West Texas. But when it comes to edible food recovery, we're actually in the lead. And the biggest thing that is holding us up is also holding everyone else up in the state. So edible food recovery comes in two types, tier 1 and tier 2. Tier 1 is easier to distribute, canned goods, things that are less perishable. The harder thing is tier 2, prepared. So places like IKEA, who we've started a relationship with already, ballpark, restaurants, they are required, especially if they're of a certain size, to give away their food. But a lot of organizations are scared of taking that for obvious. So one thing we're actually in the works with right now is working with Mercy Coalition to help them purchase a van that is temperature controlled, so they can go right to IKEA, pick up those Swedish meatballs, and then transfer them to mobile home park or apartment complex. And as I've said before, Mercy Coalition, they're leaders in homeless assistance in the city, so they know exactly where to go pop up. So we're working currently towards getting them a vehicle. And to your point about helping with that, I would just do a Google search for Mercy Coalition, reach out to Don Bosley. He's the leader. He's an amazing person. He will find work for you. So there's plenty of edible food recovery work to be done, but we're actually kind of ahead of the curve. So
That's great. And I didn't want to miss the opportunity to just say I'm really happy and applaud that your mindset is realizing that the department and the city needs to get out in the community. I mean, I don't know if, the city would consider having, or has had, I don't know, kind of like a fair, here at City Hall where, staff can basically have kind of meet and greet tables and share and talk about what they do and opportunities for civic engagement in that way. And it doesn't always have to be here. It's kind of nice. People like to come here. It's, it's important business and it's official but also taking it out into the city. It's great. But yeah, and in any of the, efforts and the initiatives to get out there and educate and perform outreach, I just feel like this commission and all of the commissions could be tapped.
I think just on the comment of buying EVs, I think in this document you have a lot of advocate for having a charger at your workplace in different places. So I thought it aligns logically to said, well, if you're installing that, then you have to get it used. And I would say that if maybe the wording is, if somebody's gonna buy a new car, maybe they should consider getting an EV. So if you're not well-to-do and you can't afford a new car, you're buying a used car or not at all. You're using the public transport, which I see in this document, and expanding it definitely with any new development in any places. That's great. And I don't know if it was mentioned that, because I do a lot of running and I know some bike, like the Parksburg Branch Trail, it gets dark at night. And in the winter times, it's less conducive. I mean, it's getting dark at 5 or 6, maybe earlier sometimes. And I wouldn't bike there. I mean, without a group of people, and that discourages some of the things. So some of the things you need to look at is there a secondary issue or tertiary issue with the recommendation that you have to address first? There's a cascading issue. So you'll see that, you might see that along the way, but that's something to consider. And maybe that's one of the ways you look at it as a group. Said, why wouldn't somebody do this? Well, it could be that they're stressed out. There's a lot of things going on. But some of the things might be aligned, like, well, do I insulate my home better because I'm paying a lot of money for energy? What can I do? Well, or I'm paying more for water. Hey, can you offer rain barrels, like you do kits for waste, and get rain barrels? Maybe get it from, that's your partnership, get it from the wineries if that works, and have it available. So those things, and I definitely advocate for. There's one thing that says, buy fewer items, and I think, are you referencing that as for the city itself, or for every individual to buy fewer items, consume less? Because I definitely see, as I run or walk and see yard sales, garage sales, people have a lot of stuff. Sometimes they can't even park their cars in the garage, so people are buying lots of stuff. And you hear the comments of, hey, porch pirates here and there. It's like, well, every time there's an Amazon sale, there's a peak load, and I've done it myself. I purchased stuff and I'm like, do I really need it? It's still sitting in a box. Why did I buy that? And then, of course, that's a waste in many ways, because something produced, I'm not using it, and it was transported now. So those are the things, and considering those things, it's being transported much further. I don't know. Most of it's from China, so it's a lot more transport involved in there. And one of the things, again, if you're thinking of individuals, the plan fewer trips, I would say one of the things that might have been missing was bulkier trips. Like, I got to do a few things, like, oh, I'm going to go grocery shopping, get it back. And I'm going to, do something else and then come back. And so those are things that probably, at an individual level, you could say, here are the things. And I would invite the community to say, any other ideas? Post it here, put it on a website.
So as far as like the material goods, I'm a consider myself a reformed minimalist. So at one point I had like less than 200 items. So I believe in it. I think consumerism is problematic in this nation. We do have something called the Repair Cafe, where people can bring their bike or torn clothes, where they can get not only help getting it stitched, but they learn how to fix it themselves. So the Mercy Coalition, which is the organization I keep bringing up, part of their plan with expanding their compound is I think they want to house Computer for Kids there, which accepts recycled electronic materials, but also teaches people how to use them. And I think the Repair Cafe may also be part of that conversation. So, by us advocating those kinds of organizations and also through our social media, I think we did something recently about Valentine's Day, like you don't have to always, buy a bunch of just stuff. So it's on our mind, but it is a challenge to, something I've learned in the sustainability world is that we're asking people to change. That's hard. If I'm a public works employee and I'm just going around fixing potholes, that's not confrontational. But if I'm telling someone to consume less, be less selfish, or be more thoughtful, that's a hard ask. So that's why we have a committee like you guys, and that's why I look forward to all of your comments, because I'm only going to be able to see all this stuff from my angle. So your guys' comments help broaden that.
Actually, the pothole issue is very interesting because part of it is environmental. If it's hotter and wetter, I believe it does damage. And if I'm buying heavier vehicles to just transport me, big SUV versus a light vehicle, that does some impact as well. So there's cascading benefits to acting on some of these things.
And just EVs are a lot heavier than a actual gas-powered car, so that is some, yes, they are not light. My car is so heavy, and it's not very big, so.
One of the big challenges with the climate action plans, we're circulating to all the different city departments. We're getting them to think about climate too, and that was, I think, an important aspect of this and going forward is making sure that all the city departments keep this in mind when they're making their purchases, how they operate. It's like you make a great point about potholes. If you're just out there filling potholes, you might not be thinking about how many more potholes will you have in the future because of higher rain events or EVs being heavier. But I just want to say, I'm the face of the climate action plan right now, but city staff from all departments have had, they've read it, they put their comments in. It's gone to all the different department heads, the city manager, assistant city manager. Everybody's taken a look at it. So it's been a very well-vetted plan.
Then that's important because what Ryan's point about we're asking for change, we're trying to engage in a new culture and to have it shared and be a collaborative process. Going to be fundamental to on the issue of procurement. Who you buy from can make a big difference in the supply chain in terms of, are you featuring sustainable companies or sustainable materials? I mean, every department probably has something they do that they need what we call, they need to ask the climate question. How can this contribute to, our community's goals, et cetera. So congrats on that engagement internally, and then we'll see what we can do externally to get the whole community involved. But as Ryan and you've both pointed out, we have leaders in this community who are involved, so we have some good foundation to build. Thank you again.
I had one more clarifying question. Did I hear correctly that, so the plan is overarching high level, flexible language to include the details we're not quite sure of yet for implementation? Is it the plan that as the city develops the more detailed initiative plans, implementation plans, that those would be brought to this commission?
Correct.
Okay.
So all those actions require follow-on implementation. That's where that phase 1 and phase 2. What's the most impactful, lowest hanging fruit? What do you go for first? Actually do those, like the urban forest management plan. That goes out for public review, goes in front of like this.
Any other questions or comments?
So just as a point, you did have one example of a company that makes an alternative to plastics. So in the procurement, it'd be interesting if the city's buying from this company, or could it? But that's definitely the part where you could definitely help businesses if like they're doing these practices. That here's one business that's doing this practice, and maybe that's a good promotion for them, and incentivize other businesses to follow through.
Yeah, we highlight local climate champions in our climate action plan, and one of them is Origin Materials. So as part of this, we interviewed a few local businesses and climate champions on how they, are being climate friendly. They're good role models for the city.
And I think one of the examples, and I have that same experience with an individual, a couple who installed solar, and they're saving lots of money. So definitely that's one where, yes, they have the resources to install it, but they're realizing the savings. And I wonder if there's an example of a landlord who did that and they benefited themselves and their tenant.
So, yeah, one of the additional kind of carrot side language things you bring in, particularly with regard to solar, is the fact that the cost per panel installed, in permanent infrastructure has gone down significantly. And so the return on investment timeline has shortened pretty dramatically for solar installations, residential and commercial. So that should be something that should be highlighted in the document as an extra benefit both for landlords and individual residences, that's making huge strides towards saving you money quicker. Maybe not as quick as we all would like, but that is the trend. And that's something that is more of a hopeful message, and something that might incentivize just a little bit more positive adoption.
It's just a little bit nice now navigate the CPUC rate-making decision relative to solar and the battery. Understand the challenge.
Yeah, I was going to ask, so is that a fact? Do we have data that is currently saying that the incentive is larger now, even with the PUC's kind of rate or tier change that happened not that long ago? Because I've been concerned about it myself, whether, did I miss the boat completely and now it's not worth it? Because I was always worried about, well, at first I have to crunch the numbers and know, what's the right way to go about this for me? And then, it changed, which I was warned it was going to change. But my question is, do we know that the rate of return is actually better, and it's still as beneficial to a new, a homeowner that now gets it?
Yeah, and that's my point. There was so much pushback on the decision that people are of the impression that it's no longer economic for them to invest because of first of all, it's going to be more expensive because they have to put the battery in as well. And second of all, what the return of investment on. So gathering whatever, current or better analysis there is. And there's still people that disagree with how the analyses are done and whether, if they're considering the right thing, et cetera. So I know it's going to be tricky to navigate. But if we can find the data and it's still economic, then being able to overcome some of the pushback on solar that resulted from the publicity that the decision got.
I understand.
I think this is where PG&E is actually helping us, because their rates are increasing, so they're helping the incentive the other way.
Wait.
So let's it's 7:30, so we can all keep having this conversation after we wrap up. Are there any other comments or questions on the cap?
Nope. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Good job.
All right, we're gonna move on to general administration function part 2, director's report. Do we have a report?
I mean, I think I provided most of my updates kind of here and there throughout
Okay.
talking about the cap, but we do have a new staff member, Raisa. She's going to be not only taking over the water conservation duties, but expanding to climate action plan implementation. So as you know, I explained to you guys late last year, I really want to have staff who are dedicated to making this happen, because even if funding isn't robust, even if intergovernmental work isn't hand in hand as much as it should be, I've often found in the conservation world that what matters is having people who can go out there and make relations. Because in my history with water conservation, I was always suspicious that there would be a lot of people that just blatantly wanted to waste water. And what I found the case to be was that a lot of it was just about ignorance. People, a landscaper setting the timer for the person and not realizing that their water was excessive and they could still have a green lawn and save half the bill. And I feel like that's even more true in the climate world. There are a lot of simple things that people can do that can have a pretty robust effect on their climate footprint. So I'm very excited to have Raisa. I am working towards a budget for the city dedicated to climate action. I think if we're going to do all this, we need to have a dedicated budget for it. I don't want to just pull piecemeal from other divisions and departments. The biggest thing is just that the climate action plan is heading towards adoption. If you guys can participate as public in the attending the city council meeting, as you guys have said, please send Seamus and I all of your detailed notes. We'd be happy to follow up on those. And I don't think I have any other. I don't have any new programs or rebates that have come out recently. So those are all my updates.
Thank you. Do you have any commissioner communications? No? Excellent. Then I will adjourn our commission meeting at 7:35. If that's the correct clock.
38, but it's fine.
38, okay.